Hi everyone, this is Alan McKay. Welcome to episode 150. This episode is all about stalking. In other words, how to get anyone's email address so you can use that for outreach and get the job. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Alan McKay Podcast. Alan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Alan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Alan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on alanmckay.com.
All right, welcome to episode 150. So, as always, really excited. I notice I'm saying that a lot. I'm really excited about this episode, but I'm doing another solo episode, and this is one that I think is going to be really useful because it's going to be all about how to get pretty much any studio person's email address. So I'm going to go through a lot of tactics and actionable things that you can do right now, mainly a lot of tools as well as kind of my recipe for how to do it. So that way you could figure out who the studio head is at your local studio, or who is the animation supervisor or the animation director for a specific company. And there's a lot of different ways that we're going to get into it. It's going to be really cool. In a way, it's going to be a little bit creepy, realizing how easy it is to pretty much get anyone's email address. And this is something that by itself, you can do more damage than good. In other words, if you just listen to this episode and say, great, now I know how to get anyone's email address, I'm just going to spam the shit out of everyone because I've got their email and they need to look at my reel, then you're not going to get anywhere, okay? So use responsibility with this. Don't just say, great, I got their email, time to start sending emails out to everyone, check out my reel, give me a job. I get those emails all the time. And again, the ones that people put care and thought into and aren't just directly asking gimme, they're the ones that get a response. They're the ones I'll click on their link and look at their work. Okay, they're the ones that I'll be invested in, and the next time they email me, I'll remember who they are instead of just something that I archived and didn't even look at again. So if you put in the effort, then I'll put in the effort, and I'm sure everyone else will put in the effort. But if you just blatantly start firing out thousands of emails, it doesn't work. And not only does this not work at the employee or the prospect level, but I see studios doing the same thing. You know, I see companies, like big companies, firing out emails to me saying, give me work, or give us, come work for us, or whatever it might be. And again, just putting in the care, doing it strategically is what matters. I've even recently noticed that there's certain companies that I just stopped responding to in LA that are looking for effects people, and I'll get the same email again like 3 weeks later, and again, so it's just like, okay, clearly you're just going through a spreadsheet, and this becomes very obvious. And I mean that like these are one of the top 5 or top 10 studios in LA. So I mean, no matter which direction it is, it happens, and it's just so obvious. So just don't do it. More importantly, I've put out so much content around this stuff that it should be pretty obvious, like how to craft the perfect email. Go to YouTube and Google my name and email. That'll come up like a tutorial on how to write an email. If you go and join my Inner Circle email list, I email actual scripts, like actual emails that I'll use to get work. Okay, so talking about how to do outreach. I'm going to be doing an episode soon on building an outreach system so that we can automate a lot of the stuff. If you want this episode, I'm actually putting out a video version of it as well. So if you go to alanmckay.com/150, I'll make sure I link to that as well. But I'm putting out an actual video tutorial on how to do all this stuff too. So that's a lot more visual, and it'll be something you can watch. But again, like everything in this episode, we get really in depth with, and I feel like this is a bit more raw than one that I'm kind of scripted and putting a lot of effort into. So I kind of enjoy doing this kind of structure a lot more anyway. But the one thing I will mention is that I have a book I put out, which is available right now on my website. It's free, and you can get it right now. It won't always be available because it's going to be released as an audiobook as well as on Amazon later in the year. But you can get it right now, as well as you'll get access to a 2-hour free masterclass on a lot of advanced tactics, all to do with your demo reel. So I put out a book specifically on how to build the ultimate demo reel, including like virality, like a lot of subjects that we get into, setting the record straight and a lot of stuff, because I'm doing it from the perspective of someone that builds teams, hires people. Even today, I've been asked to hire, I think it's like a team of a couple hundred people. And actually yesterday I had another meeting about managing a team of 300 people So like this stuff happens all the time. Like this is what I do, is that I work in productions, I'll build the teams and I'll work on the stuff and we rock stuff out. So as a supervisor, I think that there's not really been any good information out there from the perspective of someone who actually does the hiring. It's typically a journalist or some teacher or something who wrote like how to make a good demo reel, or an artist. No one who's actually looking at the reel saying, well, this is the reason that your reel gets thrown out or not watched or skipped over, or someone else got hired instead of you because of your reel, which all that stuff happens all the time. So this book, I think, whether you're just starting out or whether you've been in the industry for 10 years, because again, I've coached so many people who have been around for a long time and are super talented, yet they're making these little mistakes that are costing them the job every single time. So I've got friends who've been in the industry for 10 years, worked on a lot of big Marvel movies, and they've gone a year where no one would hire them, and just like a little few tweaks to what they're doing, and suddenly everyone is reaching out to them for work. So whatever stage you're at, I think that there's going to be a lot of valuable stuff in there for you. Because again, with me, I love trying to say like, okay, I'll cover the basics, but then I'm like, fuck the basics, let's get into the good shit. And this is exactly what this episode is going to be about as well. So that being said, if you want to get that book, go to alanmckay.com/ultimate demo reel, and I'll leave a link in the show notes as well. If you want to check out the show notes, go to alanmckay.com/150 and you will check it out there. So I will leave it there. Next episode, I'm going to be interviewing the crew manager / resource manager for Real-Time UK about everything it takes to get a job there, and a lot of insights into getting a job. You can tell that this month this is a really big subject I want to cover. I don't want to give away my whole strategy, but I'm kind of really trying to focus around this stuff a lot, just because I feel like there's still a lot of miscommunication around these things. So I want to just kind of like go all out and cover all the bases. So this one is going to be how to get emails, but then there's going to be other ones which will be how to build a really powerful outreach system, so that way you're getting 2,000 plus leads a year, which is potentially 2,000 jobs. You're constantly managing this stuff and building and nurturing relationships. There's a lot of stuff that I want to go through and share with you. So that is it. Let's get into this episode right now. Okay, so before I dive into this episode, one thing I want to mention is that if you're not already on my Inner Circle email list, make sure to sign up now at alanmckay.com/inside, and you'll be able to join up there. Now, the reason I mention that is because this episode alone, I'm actually sending out about 4 or 5 emails this week, specifically around actionable things to do around getting people's email addresses, how to reach out to them, just a lot of ways to have the upper hand, building out an outreach system, automating a lot of it, doing a lot of really cool hacks and other things like that. On top of that, there's a lot of videos I'm sending out too, and I'm also doing a live webinar this week around some of the advanced stuff and doing Q&A with everyone too. So in general, there's a lot that I'm doing, and if you're not in my email list, 99% of all the content that I build all ends up there. So it's worthwhile being on there. It's free, and getting loads of content every single day almost that will benefit you. Now, something that I've talked about a lot recently is how volatile it is to reach out and send out your reel. I think it's one of those things that a lot of us really overlook, and we think that we're going to work really hard on our reel, and then when it gets sent out, everyone's going to stop what they're doing and they're going to sit down, they're going to watch the reel, and they're going to email us back and say, hey, you got the job, come on in. And what I think a lot of us aren't really aware of is that the opportunity for your reel to actually get seen isn't really that high. More than likely, it will get seen by a certain person at the studio that you're applying for, but the person who is actually going to be making the decisions on whether or not you're good enough to come in, it's kind of like flipping a coin as to whether they're going to actually get to see your reel. And on top of that, one of the things I've communicated a lot is how important your cover letter is. And again, a lot of that stuff gets stripped away when it comes to the person reviewing your reel. Your reel isn't necessarily going to get viewed right away. It's typically going to land at human resources or with a receptionist or a studio manager. Someone is going to take a look at it and then decide, okay, we'll put you in this database. And then when someone says like, hey, we need to hire, that's when we're going to pull out a bunch of names. We're going to send them over and say, in a spreadsheet, here are these names, these email addresses, and these links to the reel. So everything else that you put so much work into goes out the window. So, for instance, you might have a shot on your reel that you know that other people at the studio have worked on as well, and it could very well be that they could look at your reel and think, wow, this person's claiming they did this shot. I know that Rick in the other room did that shot. This person's stealing their work, and instantly blacklist you from the industry. And that happens all the time. And that's why, again, I think that being able to anticipate problems before they come up means that you can cover them. So having a cover letter saying, hey, by the way, I know that I'm contacting you from Belgium, but I actually have US citizenship, so don't worry, my application isn't complicated, I can just start working tomorrow. Or whatever it might be, little things that you want to be able to cover in your cover letter to cover your ass. So there's a few different variations of why it's called a cover letter, is really critical, and it gets overlooked, as well as everything else that could make you stand out. So again, when your work's being reviewed, typically it's going to be in a spreadsheet with 100 other people, possibly more. I've reviewed lists of 300-400 artists at some of the bigger studios, and we've split them up into multiple groups, and we go through them all. And like I said, I'm just kind of touching base a little bit on this, but I want to set the tone that it's very volatile, that not only are they going to look at your work, while they're also looking at a dozen other people, hundreds of other people. So instead of your chance of having their attention and being remembered at the end of the day being 100%, it's down to 1% or 0.5%. So all of these different factors, and considering the fact that usually a supervisor isn't waking up in the morning like, great, I'm going to go look at reels. They're looking at, hey, I've got to manage a team of artists. I've got to make sure we're hitting all the deadlines. I've got to attend meetings with the director and everyone else and make sure that we're meeting our schedules and everything else that I've got to deal with, all my responsibilities. And I got to go look at a bunch of reels today too. So your attention, or their attention on the reel, isn't always going to be 100%. So all it takes is that one wrong thing, which sometimes can be as simple as the starting text with your name on it going a little bit too long, and people can just skip through the whole reel or just turn it off completely. And that's something that, again, like we've talked about in so many different podcast episodes about these exact factors. This is something I cover in a book I wrote recently, which you can, again, if you sign up to the Inner Circle, you'll get access to this stuff too. And I mentioned at the very beginning of this episode as well, which is the Ultimate Demo Reel Guide. And this is a lot of stuff that we get into. There's a lot that we get into with this. So, like I said, just setting the context of why it's important to hack everything and why it's important to really figure out a way to do things that are going to benefit you rather than trying to go through the traditional system where you end up in a database and 6 months from then your name gets pulled out and then you go through this whole process. So in earlier episodes, I think going back as far as episode 11, I think it was one on how to reach out to studios. One of the things I talk about is entering through the side door. And I actually remember I was in like South Carolina, I think, at the time, writing that episode, like freezing cold, sitting outside by the pool. And yeah, like that sort of stuff is still very relevant. That's one thing that blows me away, by the way. I got an email the other day from someone who was saying, hey, I followed everything that you said to do in the podcast and I got a job. And this stuff still works even though it was dated 2017. So I'm thinking like getting a job hasn't really changed that much in a year. Okay. So everything I talk about is always going to be relevant. But like I said, these things are all part of the strategy. You want to enter through the side door. In other words, you don't want to be going in, lining up at a job interview with all these other candidates, because all you're doing is limiting the amount of attention and focus that's going on to you. And you're also competing with every other person who is going to be trying to validate why they are the right candidate. So in other words, instead of you being the person going for that job, you have 20 other people who are also going, who might be better than you, who could be friends with them, who could just say the right joke, the right thing. It could be anything. So think about that stuff and why this is important to think outside the box, enter through the side door, create your own opportunities, and begin to build an outreach system. So in other words, with this sort of thing, I want you to start to think, okay, if I started applying for a job every day, if I send out 5 emails every day, in other words, I build a database which once you get into the system, you realize you can get thousands of emails every single day. You can start putting this into a database. In another episode, I'll get into this. I actually just sent out an email today to my inner circle, hint, hint, on exactly how to build this automated system where it's going to let you know when to contact people, and I'll get more into that another time. But like, you can build a whole system where this is really easy. You can wake up every morning, spend 10 minutes fire out 5 emails. That's nearly 2,000 emails every year without doing any real work. And that means 2,000 potential leads. And even just one of those could be a job, could be a chance to make a lot more money, new opportunity. You never know what could happen. In the email I sent out today, I was actually referencing how I had a phone call today on Skype with a guy that I fired out a couple of emails back and forth a long time ago, not over anything specific, but again, just building up those leads. And now that's something that's come back where he's now proposing a very big movie deal that's well into the 8 figures. And that thing, all I did was respond to a few of his emails back in like 2005. And then since then, once in a blue moon on Facebook, I'd respond to a message or two. And literally in the past couple of weeks, he's come back with like, hey, I got this unique opportunity. Do you want it? Now, I only mention stuff like this because, again, you think of one email that you're responding to or one email that you write could lead to anything, okay? Let alone doing 5 a day and doing that over a year and just making it your daily habit. Okay, I got 10 minutes. I'll do this while I'm on the bus, on the train, whatever. You template this stuff and just build a system around it. And the more that you do that, the more that, as I always say, you got to be in it to win it, the more opportunities that you're creating. Okay, so I've said enough about that, but I think that it's so critical to really hammer this home because a lot of us seem to nod our head and then we just go about not doing anything, and then when our job ends, it's like, all right, time to dust off the reel and start applying for work. I'm going to try to lay off the metaphors this episode, but one of the books I was reading just the other day, I'm surprised I've never heard the metaphor or the saying before, but it's you want to build your well before you're thirsty. In other words, you want to make sure that you build a well so that way it catches all the rain long before you actually want to drink. Otherwise, when you're finally thirsty, you start building the well, you've got nothing at that time that you're finally freaking out and you're like, okay, I need leads or I need water or whatever it would be. So again, you want to think about that stuff. I always say you could be the greatest artist on the planet, but if no one knows who you are, how are you going to get work? And I say that all the time because there's nothing more clear than if you're not getting out there, being visible, then how are you going to get the jobs, all the things that you want, all the opportunities? And finally, I think it's important to communicate relationships and how much it's important to nurture these, because if you don't, in other words, if you go through what I'm about to talk about and to start spamming everyone and have that gimme, gimme, gimme mindset, then no one's going to reply. They're going to see you as annoying because you're literally approaching a stranger saying, hey, you don't know me, but give me a job. And I get enough of those emails every single day, but the ones that stand out, the ones that I can see that people put in time to carefully write something and communicate, not give me their life story, but communicate what value they could bring to the team and everything else, those are the ones that stand out to me. Okay, so think more about the long-term building a relationship rather than it being specifically about you. What kind of value can you bring them? And I guess inserting a few Starbucks gift cards in the email as well doesn't hurt either. But that being said, what if you had the ability to pull up anyone's email address? In other words, you had an infinite pool of every studio head, every supervisor, every department lead, all the people who are able to grant you a job. And not only that, but it's very easy for you to actually pinpoint all of the ones in your area or whatever you're specifically targeting and be able to contact all these people. More importantly, again, using all the content they put on the inner circle, such as email scripts that you can literally copy and paste to apply for a job. All of these things, you literally can just copy paste and apply for jobs all the time, over and over and over. And the whole point is that you don't just go for the job, you build a relationship. You do the jab, jab, right hook. In other words, you build a few open loops, you have a conversation, and eventually, invisibly, you're able to start reaching out, showing your work and things like that, all through building that relationship. And that way it's all organic. But doing all that becomes a no-brainer once you put the systems in place. But the biggest thing is getting the leads, okay? This is where I turn into a telemarketer call center and say, you got to get those cold leads and you got to call them up and try and get them, hooked. But that's just it. If you do it right, then it isn't a cold lead. But the main thing is, how do you get those emails? So I'm going to go through here and kind of describe a system for doing this. At the same time, if you want to watch an actual video on how to do it, just go to alanmckay.com/150 for episode 150. Cool, we're up to 150 episodes. Awesome. And that will actually have step-by-step visually how to do exactly this. Okay? But basically, in the beginning, whenever we watch movies at the theater, you can always spot who is a visual effects person, because when the credits start rolling, everyone else gets up and leaves. Marvel's starting to change that now because there's a few people who want to sit around at the end and see like what the Easter egg is. But for the most part, you got everyone else who's going to sit there and they're going to watch the credits roll because they're interested in seeing who worked on what studio did what, where are their friends at. And for me, like, the easiest way for me to stay in touch with people is I watch the credits and I'm like, oh, I didn't know that so-and-so is at this studio now. I didn't know that that person's over in London. And I get kind of caught up quickly on like where everyone's at. So it's always fun to do that and just kind of see what people are up to and all that. But at the same time, watching the movie credits, it's actually a really good resource for you to actually look at who are the studios working on the movies that you want to work on. And more importantly, who are the particular people that might be supervising and things like that. So usually you'll have all of the artists who work on a project, but then the supervisors or the leads will usually get an individual credit. Depending on the size of the movie, that's usually how it'll go, is that they'll get the individual credit and everyone else gets like bombarded in or squeezed into, a massive list of people. Smaller movies, maybe everyone gets an individual credit, but having that as a resource, being able to just watch a movie and say, wow, okay, so this person would be really cool to reach out to. That makes it really effective to be able to have a list very quickly of who to talk to or who that you should really be speaking to at a studio that you want to work for, rather than you going to the website or emailing jobs at ILM or whatever it might be, and then getting put through a system like, go to our website and fill out the application form, and then you're put into a database, which usually, I hate to say it, but like, because I think that recruiters, or I'll say internal recruiters, I've got mixed feelings. I think that most actual companies have mixed feelings about recruiters, but when it comes to internally, like human resources and things like that, in other words, actual people on your team, it's a little bit different, where those people are really great at what they do and they really know the needs of the company, but at the same time, they're not going to be able to look at maybe a creature shader and be able to distinguish like, wow, like, this person really nailed it here, or wow, there's really obvious aliasing issues or flicker in the subsurface scattering. Like, they're not going to be able to really validate like at the highest level who's good, who's not. And sometimes those subtleties are what really makes it stand out. Because again, when you're watching a finished shot and visually it looks great, you're probably not paying attention to the fact that there are maybe some really crude elements in there, but they got massaged really well in. And because of that, like you look at ILM's amazing, but obviously it's only been the last few years that dynamics got really advanced with destruction and doing, let's say, even basic Voronoi fracturing, stuff like that. So if you go back to movies like War of the Worlds or anything before a certain time at specifically ILM, the character animators would typically animate all of the destruction. So whenever a building got destroyed or a bridge got ripped apart, that would be all character animation. And I actually think, as a segue, but I think that with effects, like learning to animate that way first is going to make you way stronger as an effects TD than just going in and learning particle systems, because you really need to understand timing, weight distribution, hitting the right beats, all of the things that are really critical that you have handed over to you on a silver platter later on. But my whole point is that with all this sort of stuff, HR, reception, the studio manager, whoever it might be, they're not typically going to be the person who is going to be looking at this stuff all day long and be able to really know, like, wow, this person has potential. Or maybe their work isn't very good, but I see a lot of potential in them. So you're looking beyond what might look like bad visuals because your lighting's off or whatever it might be. So keep that in mind, that the person typically reviewing your reel, putting in the database, stripping away all the bits of work that you put a lot of work into, like the cover letter and everything else, and dumbing it down to your name, email, and link to your reel, they're in control of your fate. And again, having the right person is going to change that a lot. So, just realizing that, like, speaking out to the right person is going to be really critical. And so again, targeting them in the movie credits and everything else is going to be really important. At the same time, like, movie credits is one area that I do actually think is really a good resource, because again, you can just pick all your favorite movies and you can go in there and know that there's going to be 10, 15 studios and just be able to handpick the stuff that you want. Because what's more important than actually watching a movie that you really enjoy and would want to work on, and then going and targeting the studios that typically get that sort of work? So in a way, you're going exactly where the water is. Now, in addition to that, IMDb is another really good one as well. Cinefx, another good one. And just reading like articles online, you can tell when people are interviewed, like, okay, that VFX supervisor or that animation supervisor, they're people that I could reach out to. Going beyond that though, like whether you start there or you just go straight into LinkedIn, LinkedIn is obviously a massive resource because everyone is on LinkedIn. I hear it all the time, like a lot of people in our industry will say, yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Like, I don't know what I'll use it for, but I figure it's better to have it and figure out down the line what I'll use it for than not have it, you know? So that means that a lot of people will be on LinkedIn and they'll update all their stuff because, you know, recruiters and everyone else are going to be looking out for their work. So typically everyone's always updating their stuff just to kind of keep valid in terms of where they're at, what they're doing. But not everyone is very active reading messages or, you know, really actually using it as a proper tool. And that's why, again, if you check out episode 32, Becoming a LinkedIn Ninja, it goes through a lot of tactics and different ways that you can utilize and take advantage of LinkedIn to be a LinkedIn ninja. So LinkedIn is really where it all begins. In other words, LinkedIn is where you can literally type in any studio and be able to come up with all the people who work there or have worked there in the past. Now, I don't think that there's any better resource out there, but that doesn't mean that you can't initially look at movie credits and everything else first and get the exact people who worked on a specific project, who are not only people you can reach out to, but when you do reach out to them, you can reference all this stuff. Because if you do your due diligence, if you research them, read some interviews, things like that, then you can come back and say, hey, by the way, I hope you don't mind me emailing you. I read an interview in this magazine and I got to say it was really inspiring. I'm just starting out. And I've been doing this for a couple of years. I wanted to just quickly say hi and ask you a quick question about that project. Blah, 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 blah. By the way, you guys rock. Thanks so much. And you can link in your email signature your reel. And some people, like I do it, I'll get curious and I'll start checking out people's websites and looking at their reel and you know, going down a rabbit hole myself. So people do end up getting curious when you build the rapport first. So doing it that way, again, rather than just going straight into LinkedIn and being like, oh, you're the person to talk to, give me a job, doing that research or figuring out organically like what the common thing that you guys can talk about will be is a good place to start. But either way, when you go into LinkedIn, the example I gave in the email I just sent out the other day was trying to target compositors. And it's kind of hard because I want to give actual results, but at the same time, I don't want to give out people's email addresses. So I thought it'd be funny to type in Method Studios and target the compositing team and pull up 3 people that I could reach out to right now who would be great candidates to give me a job as a compositor. And interestingly enough, me thinking originally, like, I don't know that many people at Method, you know, so that's probably a good one. I'm not going to annoy any of my buddies. But interestingly enough, as soon as I go into LinkedIn, I'm like, oh, there's Tom and all these other people that I haven't seen in years. Like, wow, okay, they're there now. Cool. And it becomes pretty clear that I actually have a lot of mutual connections with the people I was going to target. So already, I don't need to do the cold email. Okay, so rather than going and emailing someone directly, you can easily contact one of your buddies and say, hey, how's it going? I was wondering if you could do me a favor and pass my reel on to this person. Or, hey, do you hang out with this person? If so, I'd love to tag along for lunch sometime. I'll buy you guys lunch or whatever. And that way you've got an hour of their time hanging out and them getting to actually see what kind of person you are, rather than in a kind of job candidacy kind of position. So that sort of thing I think is important, is to utilize the connections that you have. Okay, and again, don't use people. Don't just say, hey, I haven't seen you in a while, pass this reel on, because again, people do that and it just makes you look terrible. But you can do it in a way that's genuine. And that's the most important thing with all this. But utilize your connections, because there's nothing more important than your social capital than actually contacting and building relationships with people and establishing relationships you already have and strengthening them, rather than doing new ones from scratch. But let's say that you've burned your bridges with everyone, you've got no friends, and you've got to do the cold email. Already, just by going to LinkedIn, you can type in the studio and it's going to come up with everybody who works or has worked at the studio. So from there, it's pretty easy to just simply type in addition. So like, let's say my example was Method Studios. I did the word comp, so C-O-M-P. So rather than compositor, compositing, I decided to type in comp, because I know that that's broad enough or incomplete enough that it's going to come back with compositing, compositor, comp. And it actually turned out there were a few people described as their job title as comp artist. So again, using the lingo in some cases can work in your favor. But by doing that, it automatically is going to limit it down to everyone who's in comp. And I might also want to try 2D. There's a DFX supervisor. So, again, just depending on who you're trying to target, but 2D comp, already those two should bring back a lot of the key people. And obviously some of these people are artists, but they're going to come back with senior compositor, compositing lead, compositing supervisor, head of the compositing department. All of these job titles are going to come back. So already you have a list of all the people that would be great candidates for you to contact. Now, let's just say in my case, I picked out 3 and I kind of went through the exercise doing that. But you can go and click on all those people, bring up their profiles, and already having their name and their title, it's a really good lead to start with. But on top of that, on the bottom right, you're going to have people also viewed. Is a section on the bottom right. And this is essentially the clones of these people. So in other words, if you look at the compositing supervisor, down the bottom right, there's probably going to be a bunch of other compositing supervisors in similar roles to that. Because typically the people who are looking at that person's profile are also, based on the sheer numbers, looking at these other ones as well. So in other words, it kind of creates a pattern of these are the similar people. So you could go and then find all these other compositing supervisors that you could then reach out to. So just typing in the studio, you come up with 3 or 4 different leads. Rather than just banking on one person, you could try a few different people. One might be really sociable, or one might be less disgruntled than the other one, so it's better to play by the numbers. But then on top of that, clicking on the profile, you're going to see down the bottom right, alternative people. So not necessarily at Method specifically, but at other studios. So I think that that's really important, just to broaden your options a little bit. So already you could have like 25 people you could contact. But keeping it simple, writing down like a couple of names that you wanted to reach out to on LinkedIn, already you've got a lot from that. But then from there, the fun part begins. So just building a list. And again, like you could do this so easily. Just build out a list once a week of 25 people, reach out to 5 of them every single day. Just during the week alone, you'd be good. So once you've done that though, once you've built up that list of people, you can start using a lot of tools, which I'll go through a couple of them now. But these are tools that I've used in the past whenever I want to get leads. And I actually looked up a few directors that I want to reach out to. And I was able to get a few people who I haven't successfully gotten in the past, and managed to find with huge success a lot of emails that I've been chasing for quite some time. So again, like I do this stuff not to get a job, but I'll do it to build contacts for, let's say, the podcast, or for other things that I want to reach out to. So in general, you can use this beyond just for getting your next job, but it's just a very powerful tool to have, being able to access anyone. So there's a lot of CRM tools. So CRM is customer relationship management. So again, with salespeople, there's a lot of tools out there that will crawl through the internet and pull up all this information about any given person. And there used to be a tool that I loved, and this is kind of how I got into all this, was I discovered this tool called Reportive. And Reportive, I won't bother spelling it because it doesn't exist anymore, but Reportive was a really cool little Google extension, and it meant that in Gmail, any email that I clicked on, it would automatically come up on the right side of my window with like a picture of them, their job title, what company they worked for, what country and city they're in. It would bring up their LinkedIn, their Facebook, like every bit of information. And at the time, it blew me away, because it meant that like anyone who's emailing me, I already know a lot about them. And it wasn't in a creepy way. It was more like I felt like I knew them then, because you could actually see a face of this random name that appears. And, so it just in general, it became a really useful tool. And the best thing was it was free. And I think that LinkedIn bought it for $15 million. And so now it's called Sales Navigator or something like that. Because it's not free anymore, there are other tools that are free or close to free that I'd recommend. But that one was kind of like what kind of got me aware that there's all these CRM tools, and there's companies like Salesforce and all these other really big ones that have tools that you spend ridiculous amounts of money on to use. But the tools that I want to mention are things that are affordable. So some of these are free. You might only get like 10, 15 leads a month, but it means that you could go in there and easily look for work. And then if you wanted to broaden things a little bit, it'll be really easy to pay like $19 a month and get access to 1,000 leads a month or whatever it might be. And again, if you think of that as an investment, that you're actually going to get work from this, then it's totally worth it. So some of the ones I really like, one is called Sellhack. And again, I'll leave links to all this stuff in the show notes, but Sellhack, so Sellhack, sellhack.com. And Sellhack was a Google Chrome extension. So the cool thing about any extensions is that I don't need to go to a website. I can literally be on LinkedIn or wherever I am. And I'm like, hey, time to stalk people. I hit a button and a window pops down. I can just type in who I'm looking for and at what company, and it's going to spit out their email address most of the time. So Sellhack was really good. I got pretty good results back with that. And in the example I used with Method, like every single email address I looked for, it managed to come back with with the actual accurate email address of that person. And so that was really cool. It's just a really very simple tool, and it's free, or at least you can use the free version, which is a bit limited, but it does the job. It means I can just hit a button and type it in, and most of the time I'm going to get emails back that are accurate. But I'd rather mention all the tools that I use and then kind of give you the recipe for it as well, just because sometimes they're going to work, other times they're not. So it's better to have like 5 or 6 tools at your disposal and kind of use the right one a lot of the time. And then when that one isn't working, you can switch to another, and hopefully one of them has better success. So another Chrome extension was Clearbit, and Clearbit was kind of cool because the way that it comes up was that I click compose email, and I thought it was kind of funny because that way you're literally like, okay, I'm going to email someone for a job. So you just click compose email, write your email, and then when you're ready to send it, that's when you hit the Clearbit icon and just type in the company, and it's going to come back with every single person at that company and their email address. Now, the free version is a little bit limited, so it only came back with, I think, like 30 leads, something like that. So if the person you're looking to contact isn't in there, then you have to pay to get more leads. But at least that way, it's like you can kind of generally get some pretty popular leads that you'd be able to reach out to. But it's kind of cool being able to just literally type in a company, id Software, or Valve Software, or ILM, and it's going to come back with all the emails that could be potential people to reach out to. I'm sure I'm going to get some angry emails from people who are like, man, like, why am I getting bombarded by email now? And that's again why I spent like so long in the beginning really trying to say, like, build a relationship. Don't do spammy shit, because it's not going to work for you and it's just going to piss people off. So, again, nurture the relationship. Do it genuinely. Another one that I like is Full Contact. And Full Contact is kind of like Reportive. In other words, before when I mentioned it appears in the right sidebar. So I'm using that right now, I think. I think I have it on. And so at least that way in the right sidebar, it's going to pop up saying a little bit of information about the person as well as a picture of them, stuff like that. So again, like, I don't do that in a creepy way. I'm not trying to like find out information about everyone. It's more, I like that when someone emails me, I can get a bit of a gist about their personality based on like whatever photo they put on the internet. If they got a picture of them on a motorcycle bike, then it's just like, all right, you're not really putting much effort into thinking about how you're presenting yourself to the world. But then there's other people who've got really goofy photos, or whatever it might be. So it just kind of really helps give you a little bit of an idea about the people that you're speaking to, especially in such an anonymous kind of world that we're in. So Full Contact, it's more about bringing up information about them. However, and this is like Reportive, what you can do is hit compose, type an email address, and then you wait a second, and it's going to start looking and trying to bring up information. So in other words, if you type in amckay@alanmckay.com and you wait a moment, it's going to suddenly pop up with all my information, because it's basically checking to see if there was any information about that. In other words, it's checking to see if there was a real email address. If there's a real email address, then it's actually going to bring up that information. So this is a really cool way to not only be able to get information about people, just to kind of, again, just make things a bit more contextual, but in addition to that, you can actually use this tool, and it's free, to validate email addresses, because that way you could type in an email address and hopefully it's going to come back with a lot of information about that person. That doesn't mean that the email doesn't exist if it doesn't come back with anything, but usually it will. If they're not using that email for any social accounts and things like that, then it's probably not going to come back with anything. So it really just depends on like what context they're using it in. But those are all tools, okay? So those are all Google extensions and things like that I've been using. But then there's a lot of websites. And some of these also have extensions too, but I prefer the website because the website has a lot more options. And you kind of want to have as much power at your disposal as possible. So the first one is Email Hunter, and that's hunter.io. And again, I'll leave links to everything in the show notes if you go to alanmckay.com/150. And Email Hunter is, it's okay. Again, you can use the free version and you can type in the name of the studio. And it's going to bring back a bunch of names, kind of like Clearbit did. Typically, I found I got like 30 names, something like that. I didn't really get that many names from it. So it wasn't, at least maybe if you pay more, it's going to give you more. But I found that if you put it in, it's worth giving it a shot. It might come back with the right person, but if it doesn't, then, you're out of luck. But at the same time, like if you're not sure who to contact, maybe it's going to come up with like a really good lead that you hadn't even thought about approaching, like head of 3D or head of 2D, animation director. And you're like, wow, I didn't think they had an animation director. I was going to contact the animation supervisor. So, all of this stuff can be, really useful. I'd rather use all the options than just one. The other one is Adapt. So adapt.io. A lot of these are .io companies. And Adapt, I thought I'd throw in there. It's kind of very similar to Email Hunter. It costs money, but you can sign up for free and you get like a certain amount of free credits per month, I think. So again, it's just another one to kind of throw out there. But Sales Tools was one. So salestools.io. This one I found to be really cool. Again, you got to pay to play. So in other words, if you put down money, then you're going to come back with, results. But I found just typing in Method Studios, it came back with 610 leads. So for an international company like Method, obviously it's pulling from all the different offices, but that was really cool. Like, it definitely, out of all the ones where I'm just typing a company in, it's probably the one that gave me the most amount of leads possible. But again, I think you only get access to 30 or 10 or something like that unless you pay. So the rest of them are kind of hidden until you cough up the money. So I forget what it is per month. But again, all of these, I only picked ones that were affordable. I didn't want to do any that you turn around and realize are costing ridiculous amounts of money to use every month. Just ones that are like $20 a month, stuff like that. So Sales Tools was one, that I thought was really good potential if you just want to be able to get everyone at a company's email address and be able to figure out like who would be good. And some of these, I forget if this one did it, but they'll actually mention the job titles too. So it's not just the name. It'll say name, job title, email address, which is just kind of like, wow, okay, cool. Now I know all the people to contact. Find That Lead. So findthatlead.com. This one I use the most. So I actually purchased this and I use it all the time. This one is my favorite. And it's because you can do a lot of different things. I could type in just the company. I could type in just a job title, just a city, whatever I want to do. And it's going to come back with, all that information. And I can literally export, 1,000 people all at one time into a spreadsheet if I wanted, or whatever I want to do. So it has a lot of power. And there's a lot of, again, I was looking for directors. So there's a lot of directors, like big directors that I'd been trying to find for a while, and I managed to pull a lot of contacts from there that were really cool. So Find That Lead, in its own way, I felt was like kind of my favorite one. And I bought it with like, there's a website called AppSumo, and it's more of a marketing bargain bin. Noah's going to kill me if he hears me say that, but it's essentially just like a lot of group discounts. It's a really cool site, but I got it on there for, I'm assuming $50 because it's the typical price they sell stuff for. So I got like a special lifetime deal with that for $50. And the way that AppSumo works is that they'll promote like one product a month, and that product they'll have like a ridiculously good deal on for that 1 month. So, Find That Lead obviously isn't on there right now, but, maybe there's some cool Google Analytics tool or something else on there that could be fun. So I like AppSumo, but again, it's probably not that relevant to what we're doing. But that's where I got Find That Lead for. I'm assuming $50 for like a lifetime license to it to do 2,000 contacts per month, which I thought was pretty awesome because I don't barely scratch the surface of that. I do like 20 contacts a month at most. Another one was Voila Norbit. So I'm curious how that name came to be, but Voila Norbit. And again, I'll link in the show notes, but voilanorbit.com. This one, there's a free account that will give you 50 leads for free. So not 50 a month, but 50 total. But I found this to be pretty cool as well. I got really good results with it. So the way that would work is you would put in the name and then you would put in the studio, and it'll come back with, if it finds the email, it'll spit it out. And otherwise it'll, like a lot of these, by the way, I haven't mentioned it yet, but if it doesn't find the email, it'll also use pattern recognition. So it'll tell you what it could be. And in other words, it'll tell you its best guess as to like what could potentially be the email based on the structure of all of the other emails that are coming back. So in a way, that's cool to have because by itself, it's like, okay, great. I could have probably guessed that myself. But the cool thing is that using full contact that I mentioned earlier as one example, you could then put that email into Gmail and see if it validates. In other words, if it comes back saying, yep, this is real email, or nope. And Find That Lead also does that too. So Find That Lead, you're able to put in, is this a real email? And it'll come back and say, yep, or nope. And I think Voila Norbit does as well, but you got to pay like $2 to validate it, which is not worth it. Because the other one, I'll mention in a second, or I might as well mention now, is mailtester.com. So that's just like a really basic website, and all it does is, I think, is it just does a who is and pings the, well, I think it just pings the mail server actually, and comes back with whether or not that email is legit or whether it's going to come back as a fail. And so in other words, like you could use like Voila Norbit, type in an email address or one of these, and if it comes back with a pattern recognition, because I think at the beginning Cellhack does the same thing, it'll either give you the valid email address back, or it'll give you, and it'll tell you, it'll say verified in green, or it'll come back yellow and say pattern, or I don't know, whatever it was, but it's pretty clear it's saying that this is its best guess. So that's kind of useful, because then you could go to mailtester.com and just put it in, and it's going to come back and say that the email address is real or not. The only way if it doesn't is if the domain has some kind of protection on it that doesn't allow you to test that. So for instance, ILM, I noticed they don't allow you to validate email addresses on there. However, all the tools that I mentioned, I was able to pull, like, initially when I was just testing this out, I'm like, all right, like, you know, what are some of my friends that I can look up? And like every ILM email address I put in, it was bringing back like accurate email addresses. So you can use all the other tools, and that's what I mean. You use everything for different scenarios. So if one's working, great. If not, use the other. So Mail Tester is a great way to validate email addresses, but in certain situations it mightn't be, but then another one will be. So you can kind of use these in combinations and figure out like which one works best. So Voila Norbit was a really good one, like I said, just for being able to type in the person's name and the studio, and it'll come back with an email address. But then like Mail Tester, you can validate whether that email address is real if it is like, let's say 65% sure, but if it comes back like 90% or verified, then you're probably good. So yeah, and again, you can use these in combination, because then you could get an email that's working, or it's a pattern recognition, so you're not sure if it's working or not, then go to Mail Tester. So you start in Cellhack, let's say, put an email in, and then it's going to come back and say, this may be it, but we're not sure. Then you go to Mail Tester, you put it in. Let's say it was like Jeff at ILM. And so then you put in Mail Tester, and it's going to come back saying, yep, that's a real email address. But the thing is that you don't know if that Jeff is your Jeff. And I've done that before, where I emailed like a really long personal email to a buddy of mine, and then realized that it was a different Scott S at, you know, the studio. So, you know, again, like you want to make sure it's the right person. So then going to full contact and putting that now validated, like, you know, it's a real email, but is it the right person in there? It's going to bring up their profile with their picture and everything else. And then you can say, okay, yeah, that is my buddy, and then email them, or that is the person I was going for. I recognize them from that interview or whatever. So use these in combination. But Mail Tester was the last one, just because that's something that, you know, you can validate an email very quickly. It's just a very simple tool. It's not like one with frills or anything. But finally, just in terms of the actual recipe, just to break it down, like typically what I'm going to do is I'm either going to go to IMDb or movie credits, Cinefx, whatever. I'm going to look at the movie, let's say, that you want to work on, and all the people at that studio, and then you go to LinkedIn, or you just start in LinkedIn, whichever you want to do. But you type in that studio, you find that person, and then you can also find all the other people similar to them in the also viewed category, as well as other people at the studio that might be relevant, whatever. And from there, you can simply go into Cellhack and type in the email. It's going to come back saying verified. If it is, it's green. Otherwise, it'll come back yellow and say pattern match. In other words, it's going to do its best based on how all the emails are structured at that company. And if so, then you could go to Mail Tester and confirm it. If neither of them came back, then you could go to these other tools. So Hunter.io, Adapt.io were two that I felt were good backups, but I would start with Voila Norbit and Find That Lead. Those two would be really useful to start with, because both of them I found to have 100% success with, I was going to say with almost all my things, but it's not 100%. But with all the ones I was writing in the article, I had 100%. There's just a few tricky ones that it wasn't it was more trying to find the company that certain people are at these days and track them down that way. So yeah, find that lead and Voila and Orbit were both my two go-to tools. And then Hunter and Adapt were the other ones. So those ones typically are going to give me back email addresses. And then from there, I could go into either find that lead or mail tester to confirm that those emails are valid if I'm unsure. But full contact is where I could actually bring up all their social stats. And that's where I can, see anything else I want to know about them as well. Such as I like motorcycles, then I can email them about motorcycles, whatever. So I think that's just like a really short version of it, but that would be how I can approach getting email addresses. And this is just part of the strategy because, again, it's very easy. I think that most people are going to be split into two categories. Like if I were to email you and say, hey, here's how you get anyone's email address, I think that 70 or 80% of people are going to be like, I don't care. And they're the ones who are not thinking about, wait a minute, I could get anyone's email address. That means I could literally contact like every single supervisor, artist, director, anyone that I wanted to work with. And I could reach out to them. Wow, this is full potential. A lot of people are not going to see that. They're not going to realize it. But then the other half are going to. But I think that of those 30% that realize like, wow, this is really amazing. This is actually a powerful thing that I could apply to pretty much anything. In addition to that, you need to realize how to do it and the whole concept of outreach and building a system around it and everything else. Because again, like if it requires you writing a long email every single time, you're doing it wrong. But if you're just going for the kill and saying, give me a job, you're doing it wrong. So everything requires finesse. There's a whole strategy around all of this, and outreach should be part of your job. If you think that if I just paint every day and I'm really badass at what I do, then that's all I need to do, then you're not going to get the jobs that you want. But if you can literally see who worked on a project and go reach out to them, say, hey, mentor me, or hey, got any advice, or hey, I love your work, and just kind of build that relationship, that's how it's going to be really valuable in the long term. Okay. At the same time, like if you own a studio, because I was just thinking about how there's certain people who listen to this who in the past have reached out to guests after they've been on the podcast and said, hey, you were really awesome. I really liked hearing you talk. And, I got a few quick questions or whatever. And that, again, is something like a commonality that you can build. At the same time, like I know studio owners who could probably benefit from this because they could start using this to find agencies and find the right people at the agencies. So again, on whatever level, this can be really powerful. The other thing I want to mention though is that while you're reaching out for the bosses and everyone else, like use LinkedIn and have a look around it. Who are let's say compositors, okay? Who are the other compositors at the studio? So in other words, you want to work at that studio, have a look at the other people who are already there. Have a look at the people who already got hired to work at Method or wherever it's going to be. Hopefully no one at Method emails me like, why am I getting all these emails all of a sudden? But think about that. These people have got the job that you're going for. So looking at their profile, you can start to get an idea of like what is the caliber that are typically seeked out. Are they people with a lot of experience? They're typically more expensive. In other words, senior people or more junior people are more affordable and more hired in quantity, or what's the commonalities here? On top of that, maybe a lot of them are coming from, certain schools, colleges, things like that. So being able to figure out like what are the commonalities between them can be really effective. On top of that, it doesn't take that much more work to look at their reels. So you could actually look at all these artists' reels and see like what are their chops, like what are they made of, like how good are they? Because you might look at their reel and be like, wow, all these people like they have more abstract, more motion graphics design work on their reel. They're not so much focused on photorealism or whatever it might be. So if I'm cutting a reel, maybe I should put my motion graphics work on there more and emphasize that more as well. So there's definitely little different strategies you can do. And on top of that, you can always email these artists, and just going back to the reel for a second, you can always look up their reel just by typing their name in with VFX in there as well, just like I did Method Comp, VFX, or on Vimeo or YouTube, and you'll usually find it. But most intelligent people, like smart people who've thought about it, probably have their reel on their LinkedIn, because with LinkedIn, you can put video. If you watch the episode about being a LinkedIn ninja, this is exactly what I talk about, that you can actually put, I do for my resume, I'll put literally every project, I'll put the video of what I did below it. So you can actually see like Game of Thrones and you see the Game of Thrones clip rather than just me describing it. A picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, video is worth 1,000,000, right? So having a video on there is going to be very valuable. So when you're looking at an artist profile, you can actually then see, hopefully, all the work that they're doing and get an idea of what they do and everything else. And also link to their website or whatever else. Again, the more that you know about the people who actually got hired, the more that you can say, okay, well, what are they doing that I'm not doing? Or what are the things that all the people who got hired have in common? Again, looking for these commonalities. So the one other thing I was going to mention was contacting them. So with that, you could actually email these people. There's nothing wrong with that. And either just saying hey, I was thinking about applying, I would always mention how you found them and why, because again, I get letters sent to me, I get emails and phone calls and other stuff like that. And again, the less context I have, the more I'm creeped out about why how did you find my details and everything else. But when you say, hey, I got it from here, or I'm contacting you about this, or I saw this, video or whatever, that's at least going to help me understand and be less creeped out. And the same with everyone else. Everyone's defenses are up in the beginning. So the thing is, you can contact someone though and say, hey, I stumbled across your reel online and I really like your work or your website, and I noticed you worked at a Method and I was thinking about applying there. I was curious to know what the company culture is like or whatever. And that way they can actually give you some insight into the company and everything else. Some people are going to be the opposite. They don't want more people budding for their job. So that's not always going to be the case. But again, just use your feelers, use common sense and figure out what the best approach is. But you could always contact them as well and just say hey, I love your work, and start to build a relationship with people. Just because they're not the person who's going to hire you doesn't mean that you shouldn't be reaching out to other people who are especially are in your industry and have common interests. The more that you do that, the more you're going to build up a network, and the more that down the line they might say hey, do you want to come out for drinks? And then you head out to I creepily mentioned this in the email, but Wazawa is one on Lincoln Boulevard that all the guys from Method hang out at. So you'd be like, hey, we're going to Wazawa on Lincoln Boulevard. Do you want to come out here and have some drinks and meet all the other guys? You never know what could happen just by building those relationships. And more importantly, just because they're where they are now doesn't mean that down the line they might eventually be in a place that they could hire you. And again, it's better not to think so two-dimensionally about, was one-dimensionally or two-dimensionally? Two-dimensionally about everything. You got to be genuine with how you're doing the stuff. You don't want to be literally just talking to people for the sake of gimme, that there's an ulterior motive behind it. Just start focusing on making networking a daily thing. And the more that you do it, the more it becomes second nature. And that way, without you thinking, you're commonly attracting people into your world, into your network. And that's where you want to kind of get into the habit. It's a muscle that you want to really build up over time. So reaching out to other people in your industry is a good thing. You want to be able to do stuff like that. So just keep that in mind. I think that's really important to build your network and do it in a way that you're giving way more than you're getting, because it's all going to come back in the end. And the more that you say, hey, this person does a lot of this stuff, maybe I could email them and say, hey, we're actually testing out this new software. If you want, I can get you on the beta. Whatever, think of ways that you can bring value to them. Because again, people are in a way selfish in a way that whenever you're doing anything, in a way, when you approach someone, they are going to be subconsciously thinking, what's in it for me? What am I going to get from this? And if you're too busy trying to get something from them, then it's going to be a huge disconnect. But if you're coming to someone, putting in that value, putting in that effort in the beginning, that's how you build contacts. And that's how you build contacts with people who probably are outside of your network, is bringing value to them. So think of ways to do that, okay? I get people all the time email me hey, if you ever want to borrow my $50,000 camera, or we have a drone or whatever, come on out and check it out. Or we're going on a shoot if you want to come along for fun. The more I get invited to that sort of stuff, it's just wow, this person doesn't know me and has extended their hand, or whatever people extend, their branch, I don't know, extended out to me saying, hey, do you want to do this, or do you want access to this? That's their way of giving some value. And that makes you say, wow, this person is cool. I want to get to know them, or however it works. But just think about that. Come in being genuine about stuff, not with the whole gimme mentality. And again, put strategy on everything. Really think the long term. Don't just be looking for that instant withdrawal. So I'm going to leave it there, but I'm hoping this is really valuable to you. This is kind of the format that I'm going to be going for moving forward. In other words, it's going to be a lot of solo episodes, a lot of, I hope, really great content. And it's going to be consistent with everything else I'm doing. So with the new website, with a lot of the things that are changing now, I'm going to be posting a lot of very actionable content. I'm going to be emailing out to my inner circle a lot. I'm going to be putting out a lot of videos, tutorials. I'm going to be doing live webinars. I've got a live webinar coming up on advanced tactics for your reel, and just a lot of stuff around that as well, including like how to make your reel more visible online, all that kind of stuff. So go to alanmckay.com/inside and get on the inner circle there. Getting tongue-tied now. I'm like, whew. But go there and check that out. Because if you're on there, then you're not going to miss anything. You're going to get a lot of really valuable content, and it's going to be rapid fire. But as long as it lands in your inbox, you can always archive it, and then you've got a lifetime of value that you can look back on. Okay, so that's something that a lot of people get a lot of results from. People getting pay rises, jobs, their dream jobs. Everyone is getting results from this material, and that's what and why I put in all the time to do all this, because I want to give back and I want to give value, and I want all of you to reach your full potential. So I'll leave it there. I'm going to be back next episode, and I'm doing an interview with the recruiting and resourcing manager for Real Time UK. So I'm going to still do interviews, but I'm going to kind of put them in between all the content. It used to be the other way around, because the content part, like everyone always emails me how much they love the solo episodes, they get so much from it, but it's so much more work. But now I'm flipping it around. I'm actually going to be doing a lot more solo episodes, a lot more content, and I'm going to sprinkle in interviews here and there as well. So that being said, next episode I'm going to be interviewing Real Time UK, who does amazing game cinematics. They're also doing a lot of VR commercials, a lot of cool stuff. So they share a lot of really great insights into how to get a job. And I've been interviewing a lot of the staffing people lately, just because, again, these are the people that you're typically dealing with. They're the ones who are going to be able to tell you exactly what they see every single day that costs you the job. When you send a reel in and it doesn't get looked at and all these other things, which is exactly why if they hear this episode, they're going to say, Alan, you're making my job not any easier when people are bypassing me and going straight for the other people. Like, this is why I'm around, to manage everything and to be able to put everyone in a database and to be able to bring up all the right candidates for the right job and for the right people. But again, this is why I got to be sneaky about it and say, well, look, sometimes it's worth bypassing everyone else. You're still going to end up in that database and get recommended to speak to HR, but isn't it going to be a lot better when it's coming from the person who's going to say, hey, I really like this person, let's put them to the top of the list, rather than the other way around, where you're trying to validate yourself to so many different people and your message is going to get depleted over time. So just keep that in mind, okay? But that being said, I'll be back next episode. If you want to check out the show notes, go to alanmckay.com/150, and you can check out the show notes there, as well as links to all the previous episodes that I had referenced, like being a LinkedIn ninja and how to enter through the side door and how to apply for or how to approach getting a job. In addition to that, I have a book that you can get access to right now, which is the Ultimate Demo Reel Guide. So this is something that I'm really proud of, and I'm going to be releasing an audiobook as well as a physical copy of this on Amazon later this year. But for the time being, you can get the ebook as well as a bonus masterclass video, which is I think a 2-hour video going through a lot of advanced tactics, as well as a lot of other cool stuff. And at least for now, it's free. If you want to get it, go to alanmckay.com/ultimate demo reel. Again, there'll be a link in the show notes at alanmckay.com/150, but alanmckay.com/ultimate demo reel, and you can sign up there to get the book, as well as optionally if you want to get the 2-hour masterclass, which is also free. Like I said, this isn't always going to be available, so it's best to get it now. And this goes through everything that I can share with you on this subject. Okay, so that is it. I'll be back next episode with Real Time UK. Until then, rock on.